She's not yours, it's just your turn. This has come up recently as Dr. Sean Smith and John Somnes, also known as Bulldog Mindset, have recently put out a video on She's Not Yours, It's Just Your Turn, as well as a tweet praising it as useful. So, after watching the critique, I have to say, these guys are smart people. They're smarter than me. So how is it they can misinterpret this so badly? So, typical internet. We run to the notebook and start putting our thoughts down and then standing in front of the editing software to correct someone on the internet. Yes, I'm one of those guys. And hey, it's very easy to dismiss this, to think, it's just an opinion and who cares anyway, and why are you getting mad, bro? Well, because this is kind of important. The theme of this isn't me telling you what to think, but more telling you how to think. And by the time I'm done with this video, I expect you, the viewer, whether you agree with me or not, to come out of this with a better understanding of how to think for yourself, how to understand the world, and best of all, how to change your mind when the information changes. So getting started. What does the phrase, "she's not yours, it's just your turn," what does it mean? Honestly, it's a beautiful, simple phrase. 7 fancy words polished to a fine shine. I'll break it down for you here. It starts off with she as the subject. Now, if you've followed me for any length of time, you'll know that I see it on the daily. When a man describes his life from his girl's perspective, you just know he has no frame of his own. That tinge of codependence when he doesn't consider himself his own protagonist in his own life story. This is why guys, by the way, are told to write field reports. It gives focus and clarity to a man's motivations and perspective. It sets the stage for a man who is just lost in his girlfriend's frame. She. Now, adding to it is, she's not yours. And there's the correction. It sounds like something your big brother would tell you if you needed to give your head a shake. Now, ownership just isn't an option. I mean, it was a concept from the bygone days of yore when a father gave the bride to the groom during the wedding, and it was more than just a symbolic gesture. I mean, you were legally responsible for her. If she ran up a debt, that was your debt. If she got assaulted, it was considered a property crime for the father or the husband. So we're more civilized now, and we've moved on. I'm not going to sit here and argue that if this is progress or regression, because I really don't care to navel gaze. What women gained was legal autonomy. What we lost was the legal force behind many men's need to protect those under his care. So, for example, what do you treat better? A car that you own or one that you rent? She's not yours. In 3 simple words. A way to let you know these days are gone and you need to let them go. And let's map this to a couple basic scenarios. You have been married 20 years. And one day, slowly over time, she gets bored and she gets lonely and she hits it off and decides to sleep with a friend at church. Now, this used to be illegal. Adultery laws were there to punish this kind of behavior, but they're gone now. So, how can something be yours if there's no consequence for somebody taking it? She's not yours. Let's say you're on a date. It's date 3, and this chick is the best one you've ever seen. You hit it off, and after your date, she calls up her friends with benefits to go and smash. Which is weird. You had a lovely dinner, and you went home with a peck on the cheek. How dare she? You went through all of this date rigmarole, and she just gives it up to a guy who couldn't even be bothered to tie his shoes before coming over to smash? Bro, she's not yours, man. Married and having thrown away a few decades of your life, or single and having all your effort basically fluff the girl for the after date? It makes a guy mad, doesn't it? I mean, all these investments treated so flippantly, how dare she? Well, this is where the next half of the sentence chimes in. It's just your turn. Circling back to anger. Anger is a social emotion. In this way, it's different from the other emotions we experience. It requires both an emotional trigger and a social component. For example, if you stub your toe on the sofa, you get hurt. You scream and you cuss, but you're not angry. However, if Stacy put that sofa right there, even though you asked her not to, her actions directly caused the pain. Now you're angry. It's just your turn is a way of channeling that anger to where it can do the most good. Getting on with your life. I argue that anybody who dismisses this phrase has a conscious or subconscious aversion to men and anger, which denies a part of us that's kind of important. Anger is one of the few emotions that's very uniquely male. I mean, sure, women can get angry, but they don't get physical to the extent men do. Anger was our social to the world, that somebody has done us wrong, and if it's not fixed, we intend to escalate in the way men historically have. Now, I get it. We're civilized now. But even though we don't have duels in the street anymore to counter the besmirching of our honor, our DNA is the same as it always was. So we can't deny that it's a natural part of who we are. Having said that, in this case, it's misplaced. We are mad because we assumed ownership, but we never had it. Not socially, not legally, not in any way. So it makes no sense to get angry over things we can't control, and this is just one of them. It was just your turn. Just. On a side note, that word is the perfect word to add to this. This statement has no fat added to it. Every word is important. It adds an irreverence to this. It takes the whole idea of dealing with the loss of a relationship, of a date, or any anger-inducing behavior from any of the women in your life and turning it down to a 2. It's dismissive because the thoughterry, it's not the hill you want to die on. If you crash your brand new car, you're angry, you're hurt, you have a loss. If you crash the car you just rented, you call the company and get insurance sorted out. And that's a key point that I really want to stress here. Nobody in this space cares if the phrase is true. Only that it's useful. So what actions does a guy take after internalizing the idea that no woman is yours, you don't own any woman and it's just your turn? Well, guys will turn down the anger in places where it's not warranted. Guys temper their expectations to the reality of the world. And for situations where things does go bad, guys suck it up without worrying whose fault it is or who to blame. We're not children anymore, so we don't care about who's at fault or who's to blame. We are focused on fixing our scenario the way it is. What happened, happened. So what do you do now? And that is all that matters, because she isn't yours. It's just your turn. So now that we know the point of the phrase, why is there any disagreement at all? I've been in the trenches, as lame as it sounds. Hundreds of men talking about their lives with an honesty. It's stripped of pretense, stripped of lies, of social signaling. It's raw. It's exposed men talking about their mistakes, their failures, and eventually their successes. So now that I've said all this, the one thing that absolutely irks me about some of the content coming out of this space is what I call don't eat paint warnings. Along with that, some very emotionally laden language, full of container words and shame. So those were my 3 problems with Sean's tweet and John's video. Container words, eating paint, and emotional manipulation. Now, a couple quotes here for container words. At one point, John describes how this kind of stuff only applies to low-value men. Quickly, this phrase is a very sinister phrase. It implies that your value only works insofar as it's female approved. So acting attractive, it has nothing to do with you leveling up as a man. You act attractive because you want to smash and people treat you better, not because you derive self-worth from it. I find it very disingenuous when somebody suggests she's not yours, it's just your turn is low value because it vilifies women, while at the same time suggesting that high-value men only happen when they appeal to them. So when I say it's a container word, what exactly do they mean with that? Well, I'll start with another quote first. this isn't exactly how we want to act as men. And again, I hate this phrase. Men used it as an identity. It's like when I talk about container words, this is exactly what I mean. Take a bunch of vague, emotional concepts, aspirational models, throw them into this box and write man on the cover. Throw it at someone's feet and force them to accept your box. I mean, their box has different things in it than your box, but you've described the box so lazily and so vaguely that people often just go along with it. Meanwhile, both boxes are filled with complete junk. There is no singular life path as man. No linear progression from child to man that you can level up. This isn't Skyrim. You're not gaining experience levels. I consider myself a man, as does John. However, an important part of being a man, insofar as the term has any meaning at all, is about not letting shame manipulate you into thinking or doing anything you don't want to do. So I would urge you, the listener, to be very skeptical when anyone starts a sentence with, "as a man you should," because they are literally trying to attempt to instill a value system into you that you didn't want. Now, if it's in your best interests, that's fine. But if one needs to appeal to my masculinity to get me to do something, chances are there is no best interest to appeal to. Eating paint. The military required everybody to teach to the lowest common denominator, and I hated it. Look around the room, and whoever was the biggest idiot there was the only one who was able to follow the lessons. Everything was designed with the assumption that most people would eat lead paint if you didn't put the warning on the label. Too stupid to know lead is poisonous, but smart enough to trust in the authority of the label. Screw that. So, paraphrasing a couple things here, that the term is more destructive than helpful. Never mind, I don't know what destructive or helpful means. Not in that case, it's just thrown out and you're supposed to believe whatever you want to believe and put that in there, but that's container words, that's the other quote. Guys, take this, then think all women are whores, which we'll get to that in a sec. And then guys take this and become detached from women, which, again, we'll get to that in a second. So I won't mince words here. Some men have "born to fail" written on their foreheads. They don't know what they're doing, and they need to be told what to do, otherwise they would walk off a cliff. I don't care about them. You don't care about them. So suggesting we temper our information based on them does you, and it does me, a disservice. Let them burn. If they are a permanent screw-up, nothing I say will prevent that. So I assume the guy listening to this is smart enough to know that he's not capable of being a psychopath over 7 words on a tweet. So when I hear that guys take this, then they'll think all women are whores or become detached, what I hear is video games cause school shootings or porn breaks your dick. Like, I'm here to tell you, video games don't cause school shootings. Porn doesn't break your dick. And just because your girlfriend watches Captain Marvel doesn't mean she's going to go pick a fight with a 200-pound Russian man. All those quotes basically boil down to, only bad man does this. You're not bad man, are you? Now, do you remember what I said before? Shame cannot be a motivator for you to think or act in any way. And if you don't believe me, go ask your henpecked coworker how it's working out for him. You know, having his wife nag and berate him to make more money and buy her a nicer house. Look, if it's helpful, you'll see for yourself. If it's not helpful, you'll ignore it and move on. Having said that, it's been around for over a decade now and has only resonated harder and harder with more and more guys. There's a reason for that, and it's because it's effective. Guys no longer get mad when a girl does what a girl does. It was fun, and now it's over. I know this because I ask guys who internalize it. I don't assume the guys who did this were broken. Now, emotional manipulation. In this, I kind of mean covert contracts, shaming language, appeals to a sense of nobility, all of it together. It's the pathos of masculinity. It's not logical, it's not an appeal to authority, it's not logos, it's not ethos, it's emotional, it's pathos. So a couple quotes here, paraphrased, where John suggests, "No guy is better than me, I'm the best she can get, and she should know it. Makes you non-reactive and commands respect. And if you do this, she'll act right." Never mind that commanding respect isn't an end, it's a means to an end. But put that aside. So what happens if she doesn't act right? Even though you were telling yourself these affirmations, what happens if she wasn't acting in the way you set this up? Now, this is called a covert contract. A covert contract is a term coined by Dr. Glover, who figured this out after 20 years of clinical practice with couples. I talk about it in the No More Mr. Nice Guy series. It's on my sidebar. Go check it out. But simply put, a covert contract is where you act a certain way with the expectation of getting a certain result from her, like a contract. But this was never discussed beforehand, and she never agreed to it. So when she breaks this contract, and I'm saying when, not if, all women break this contract, because there's a part of their limbic system that kind of knows why guys are doing this. Girls have tons of experience. They just kind of intuit about these things. But they don't like the idea of that sort of responsibility, and so they naturally want to crush it. It's something called, it's based on a concept called the commitment skepticism bias from Dr. David Buss and Cindy Minson, but that's getting a little off topic here. The point is, when she breaks the covert contract, she's not playing the game to your rules. And that's why she's not yours, it's just your turn is here, because it's exactly designed for this specific scenario. You aren't playing the game where if you build it and use the magic words, she'll just act right. You're playing the game of, you act in accordance with your best interests and filter for people who do the same. The former is a bundle of covert contracts, broken expectations, and cycles of resentment, which destroys relationships far more than being okay with loss ever has. So when I hear stuff like guys here, she's not yours, it's just your turn, and take it as defeatist and figure, why bother? Again, this is video games cause school shootings, so why bother? Look, tempering expectations is the entire point. Why bother with somebody who's not interested in you? Why bother with somebody who's not investing with you? Why take a girl on an expensive date, a nice dinner, fancy drinks, and a fun night out? What did she do that she deserved this? How valuable was she that she was owed a $300 night out? Now, if she's been dating you for a while and she's been great to you, sure. Why wouldn't you reward people who treat you well with your best? But a first date? Dude, she's not yours. So why does she get your best? You see what I mean though? You force yourself to look at people dispassionately, to temper your emotions. You don't think you're awesome and it's her loss if she doesn't respect that while you tip 18%. Look up, man. She's swiping right on Chad. Anyways, I've been going on long enough. She's not yours, it's just your turn is a beautiful mental model. 7 words to perfectly describe the hero's journey of a man in a relationship to the women around him. Healthy in that it makes men focus on their own point of origin, tempers their emotions to those deserving of them, and focuses their anger to places where it's warranted, not the places where it isn't. As to why somebody would argue against it, well, my answer would depend on how charitable you want me to be. Often, we don't realize we're pedestalizing women. It's so ingrained in us that the idea of putting man as the protagonist in our own mental models is akin to hate. Sometimes, it's simply that the most annoying people are the ones that keep repeating this stuff like it's a catchphrase. I keep telling guys, don't red pill people because the guy who loves to ramble about all of these things aren't really attractive enough to convince anybody that it's a good idea. So stop helping bros. Now, if I were more jaded, I would say that all of this red-pilled mental model stuff are commodities at this point. I mean, they're open, they're available to all for free, and when you have a commodity, branding is how you tell the difference between the same things. Coke versus Pepsi, Robin Hood flour versus Five Roses flour. So, arbitrarily changing the ideas and the concepts that thousands of men and decades of work will differentiate you as a brand, the same as Victorian-era people used to put alum and borax into their flour. So regardless, this isn't a slight over Sean or John. I like both the guys. We've never had issues between us the handful of times we've met. The point here is to show you guys how to think, not just tell you what to think. And don't forget, she's not yours, it's just your turn. So as always, thanks guys for checking out this episode of Red Pilled Coffee. As always, I talk about this kind of stuff and a lot more in Buck Files, the book, still available on Amazon. Audiobook is just going through some of the finishing touches right now. It should hopefully be out before Christmas if you're not the reading type. Otherwise, links in the description. You're going to see it on Amazon as well as Kindle. So on that note, I hope you guys learned a lot from this one. And if not, well, then things happen. But I'll catch you guys later, and cheers.